Let's bring in Pete Paschal. He is from Mashable Tech, the editor at Mashable Tech. Pete, what are you thinking about this report? Stock is soaring right now, up 9%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid quarter. I mean, I think it's kind of well within sort of what we've seen Twitter sort of blip up and blip down in the past. Like the revenue beat has me very curious about how their TV sort of efforts are doing. So like obviously Twitter has gotten into more live video. They're making deals with sports leagues. Though it's interesting, like if you look at the website or the app, you would never know it. You know, like they have all this video stuff going on, yet, you know, they don't really have a landing page or a real good way to discover it. But I'm curious if any of that is sort of contributing to this at all and what sort of the long-term prospects of that look like for them. And I hope Jack discusses that on the call.
So they added 4 million monthly users in the third quarter to a total of 330 million users. The increase was 4 million users. Was that a number that you expected, Pete?
Yeah, I mean it's okay, right? I mean they've gone like up a bit and down a bit here and there. That's sort of well within that. The one crazy quarter we saw was sort of the Trump bump quarter, which was like 9 million a couple quarters ago. But the thing is, like this fixation on user growth with Twitter, I think they're desperate to change that conversation. I mean, it's pretty apparent now that Twitter is kind of as big as it's about going to get, and it's going to have some steady growth. But to me, like, I feel like the fundamental question with Twitter, like, you look, to my mind, they have the highest rated thing on the internet right now, which is the Trump Twitter feed. Yet, fundamentally, they can't make money off it, either directly or indirectly. And that, to me, kind of like just shows there's a fundamental problem with the service. Now, they are rethinking some fundamentals of the service, like the character count, which is kind of good news, but it's also just shows how desperate they are.
But here's the problem: being a fan of President Trump or a hater of the commander-in-chief doesn't tell Twitter what kind of soap you like to buy or what kind of deodorant I use. That's the central problem with attaching ads to the way people behave on Twitter, and that goes to a core problem. However, I will point out the fact that President Trump still uses Twitter each and every day. It is a must-see. It is a go-to, and I would argue that some of this quarterly user growth of 4 million is in part because people have to be there if they want to stay on top of the political news.
But they also...
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it definitely, yes.
I was just going to say that...
Go ahead, Pete.
There's a lot of... when Trump tweets, it gets all over the news. So there's plenty of places where you can see it that are outside of Twitter's platform. So it doesn't necessarily translate into actual user growth or engagement.
Fair enough.
Well, let me toss out this idea.
I've got to tell you, everybody here, so many people here asking, am I on WhatsApp? I mean, WhatsApp is used a lot here. I feel like everyone from CEOs to government officials are all on WhatsApp. So I don't know what you make of that, Pete, but is that as popular today?
Certainly
has that
messaging
popularity
apps,
grown?
Messaging apps like WhatsApp have been a big factor in why Twitter can't grow, right? Because these messaging apps are fulfilling that sort of person-to-person or group chat that Twitter could have owned early in its growth. So, like, those apps, which are also equally challenging to monetize in some ways. I mean, stickers kind of seems to be one of the key things of that the way they make money. You know, that like that sort of space is extremely interesting and growing, arguably even faster than Twitter. So, you know, that's definitely a big part of the conversation, at least in the rest of the world.
Well, that's also why Facebook has done...
All right, we will leave it there. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well,
go ahead, Brian.
Facebook has been so smart in its strategy to stamp out competition by buying up these really rapidly rising companies, like WhatsApp is a good example. You know, Twitter and Snapchat, they're both companies that are still out there trying to compete against Facebook, but, you know, they bought Instagram, and so that was able to head off a lot of the growth that was coming from Snapchat. So they've really kind of put a ceiling, it seems, on the ability for some of these companies to grow.
All right, we will leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for that. Pete Paschal, great to see you, sir.
You too.
Thank you. And we